where we start differently with flow. We have always started with, you have to start with leadership. They have to be on board for the change, and they need to model the behavior, and they have to do it in a way so that it will permeate the entire organization. So it starts at the top, and it goes out into the other three boxes. By the way, when you do a transformation, this is the mistake that most agile methodologies make, is they focus on the team or product slash program level. Because SAFe, for example, or less, large scale Scrum, both of those are just program level tools. And so they're focused on the lower left box with the team and the upper right box with the product. Okay, and it's just a tool set view. Flow, since it's beginning with the leadership view, it's a mindset view, and it goes through the entire organization. It's a repeatable leadership framework, and it works person to person, team to team, product to product, program to program, process to process, manager to manager, ultimately to the portfolio executive levels, director levels, C-suite, and above. It all has to work together. You cannot transform one box without touching the other three. It's just impossible. You can't do that. And that's why with flow, we come from the leadership and transformation and mindset perspective that we're there to transform, not just at the team level or the product program level. And that's the mistake in scaling that the traditional agile, I love using that term, that's the mistake the agilists continually make, is that they think, well, if we scale these two and we just do the structures and only do a tool set view, we're going to be successful. No, you're not. It's a both and. You got to have the structure and the tools, but you better have the transformational part of it where you're working on leadership and mindset. And that leadership works its way through the entire organization. I have an entire separate slide deck that I'm going to be recording where this is, we're going to go through how to use flow in transformation. But just briefly, we'll go to the next slide. Here is the starting point that almost no agile or traditional methodology really takes these things into account, and that's how do you go from abstract down to concrete. That will probably drive people nuts, because when you talk about vision, mission, purpose, core values, attitudes, those are all very abstract ideas. They're getting a little more concrete as you go down through that. Companies spend millions of dollars on their vision and mission statements, on their core values and attitudes. We had a guy we worked with that where they had a poster up with all the values of the company, and next to them he had little check marks next to each one, almost like on an American football helmet, with all the little stickers that they put on there every time they do something good. And so one of the days we asked him, hey, what's up with all the check marks? So he ran over to his door, looked up and down the hall, closed the door, and then he said, yeah, every time an executive violates one of these core values, I put a check mark. And it was nothing but check marks on every line. Okay, so that's the difference between talking the talk and actually walking the talk. But back to, how do you transform? How do you take something as abstract as a vision or mission and bring that down to the concrete team level? And when you look at culture, if you look at a definition like in Merriam-Webster or almost any of the dictionaries that you look at, almost every one of these words will pop up as part of culture. And so we started looking at this, that, okay, If you're going to transform the culture, you're talking about something that's extremely abstract, and the culture is the sum of everybody who's there, the individual visions, missions, purposes, the individual core values and attitudes, their strategy, their goals and objectives, every one of those. An individual's vision statement should answer the question of, why am I here? Why am I on this team? How do I contribute to making this team successful? If a person is just there to do their job, right there already, their core value and attitude is going to be a blocker to the success of your team. We've all run into people that we have probably wished weren't on the team. And so as we're looking at this, just keep in mind that if you're going to go from abstract to concrete, there are methods for doing this, plus everything that we do in all four boxes impacts the culture of the organization. And again, you can't touch one of those boxes without touching the other three. And we go more into this in both the transformation slide deck I'm going to be doing, as well as the Flow Certified Professional slide deck that we take people through when they become Flow Certified Professionals. One of the key things for shaping culture as a company is on their journey to trying to become agile or trying to achieve flow or flow leadership is cascading vision. Most companies do a pretty good job of cascading vision and getting their vision down through each level. In the FCP Flow Certified Professional Training, I will take people through what happens if it's only a 10% loss at each level or a 20% loss of the message at each level. It doesn't take long that, for example, I think with a 20%, or if you only lose 20% of the message at each of these levels, that typically by the time you're to the program or project level, you've already lost half the message. And that's just normal. That's normal communications theory. I'm not teaching anything new here. But how effective a company is at cascading their vision is part of the equation for determining how successful they will be. It also helps them to go from abstract down to concrete. How do I take that executive's vision and bring it down to the task level? How do I decompose it along the way from, okay, here's the grand vision, here's the epics or super epics that I have to do to achieve that vision, here's the user stories that will contribute to achieving that vision, and ultimately down to the daily tasks that the individual needs to do. And as we look at this, in one of the other slides, I'll share the difference between the language of management and the language of leadership. That's down in the section with the Flow in a Nutshell posters that I'll briefly walk you through. But basically, the executive senior management, they speak the language of leadership. By the time you're to the program level down, you're mostly speaking the language of management. And management is how to, get people to do stuff and get things done, and working with things and people. Where the language of leadership is the very abstract ideas and the governance and how do we get all of this done? How do we do the transformations so they work and things like that? But when you're talking structure, then you're already at the program level. Most Agile scaling methodologies focus on structure, where you have a bunch of teams and you'll put a structure over them. It might be scaled Agile framework with SAFe. It might be less large-scale Scrum. Many companies use one or the other or any of the other scaling methodologies that's out there. But the structure is more a tool set view, and the transformation leadership is a mindset view. And it's how do you change the minds of the individual. People don't like to change their minds, but they're willing to make a new decision based on new information. And so the power of the one thing, we go deep into that in the Flow Certified Professional training. I'm not going to do that here, but you're trying to go from very abstract down to concrete. What it is that the team needs to achieve? What is it that I need to achieve as part of that team? Now, the thing that almost no company does, and I've never seen anyone do it well, Traditional tried to do this using a thing called lessons learned. I've never seen lessons learned work well anywhere in any organization. The only person that it benefits is the person that actually wrote the lessons learned. But the concept is what's the one thing that I need as an individual or that we need as a team that if the executive leadership did it, it would make us just wildly successful. And that's the idea of having just one little domino knock over the next big one. And as you go up those, there's videos out there. We actually take you through that in the other training where you don't have to go through many increasing size dominoes before you're to a block that if you start out with something that's, a centimeter or 2 centimeters tall or whatever, one of those can knock over ultimately as it goes up to the next size up. It can knock over a block weighing a couple 100 kilos that's probably 1.5 meters, almost 2 meters tall. And at the top of that, the BHAGs comes from Jim Collins' book, Good to Greats, and that's the big, hairy, audacious goals that we as an individual or team want to achieve, because goals are more concrete, as we saw on that previous slide. And so it's one thing to be able to communicate down through the organization. It's another thing to successfully link back to the next level above you and push that up through the organization so that the executives can say, okay, here's our list of one things. And instead of having a list that's 10,000 items long, they might have a list that's 50 or 100 long. And then they would go through, prioritize those, and figure out which ones are the ones that are going to make the biggest difference for the organization. And but it still has to be communicated back down to the team. So this is an iterative, continuous process. And this may be one of the most powerful parts of flow, because when you do this one right, this creates a very well-oiled organization. In cascading vision, it has to happen in all 4 boxes. Okay? And so as you look at this and you're thinking about, okay, we're going to transform the organization, Dr. Cotter, I believe it's from Harvard, he talks about we under-communicate vision by a factor of 10. So if you're the leader of an organization, you had better be communicating your vision for the changes you want to see happen. You'd better be communicating it 10 times more than you think that you should be communicating that. When we're looking at the same thing for the product, okay? Many times you might be starting with the product and you're not really sure what the customer wants. You need to start with the customer vision. You need to cascade that down through the product, program, organization, down to the team level, and ultimately down to the individual level. This is sort of to try to help everyone understand that there are a lot of things in play at the same time in an organization. We were taught in traditional project management that communication is 80% of all project management. The reality is that it's closer to 95% of that.